I'm going to introduce the moderator of this panel and our main speaker today. It's Molly Vogt. She is the State Director of American Energy Works. She is a passionate advocate for free markets and energy independence and individual liberty with a career spanning the oil and gas, financial, and media industries. Molly actively educates policymakers and the public on real and sustainable economic benefits of free markets, fair competition, consumer choice, minimally mandated regulations, and low tax rates. In 2016, she had the profound honor of traveling to Normandy, France on D-Day with 4 D-Day veterans, witnessing firsthand the gratitude of the French people and the lasting impact of their bravery. Molly also serves on the board of Life Restored SA, a nonprofit dedicated to restoring hope and life to survivors of sexual exploitation and trafficking, while raising awareness to stop this horrific industry. Driven by a mission to empower, educate, and advocate, Molly remains committed to defending freedom, promoting energy prosperity, and ensuring that American policies put people, not politics, first. Molly Vogt also currently hosts a podcast that airs on OBBM Network TV. Welcome, Molly Vogt.
Thank you. Well, happy Valentine's. How y'all doing today? Awesome. Saving the best for last, I guess. Anyone familiar with Atlas Shrugged? Does anyone else feel like they're in Galt's Gulch right now? I don't even want to leave. Exactly, right? I am surrounded by brilliant, amazing producers. You are workers. You are the salt of the earth. You are the people that are putting the food in our stores, in our mouth, in our families, and you're the workers. You're getting this country, you're saving this country, right? So thank you for all that you guys do. I just appreciate it. I'm honored to be here with you. I know we all are, and we'd love to stay, but we've got to fight, right? So after this, we're going to head out there. But one quick thing, he said I'm with American Energy Works, and I just wanted to kind of connect the dots for you on that. It may sound vaguely familiar. It is the sister organization of American Energy Institute, which you heard the Carbon King Jason Isaac speak yesterday. He is the founder of both. He is my boss, and I am grateful to get to work alongside him. And I'll tell you an interesting story. I am a refugee from Colorado. I fought as long as I could. Thank you, Texas, for letting me in. Please close the border now. Only red from now on, right? And so, but I got here and I went to my state representative, Carrie Isaac, and I said, Carrie, what can I do? How can I help you fight? We've got to keep Texas red. She said, you need to meet my husband. So she introduced me to Jason, and it turns out that Jason had this huge goal, but he simplified it. He said, I'm going to liberate American energy and then eradicate energy poverty around the globe. Are you in? I said, count me in. That sounds great. Absolutely, 100%. And that's what we're doing. You know, and what's interesting is that, of course, I knew there was an attack on oil and gas. I was in the industry myself. I know what's going on there, but I didn't understand, all of the different weapons that they were using against us. I wasn't familiar with ESG. I wasn't familiar with how they were weaponizing financial institutions against us and our banks against us, and they were coming after our farmers, and they were saying, we need to be at net zero. And you know what? I really didn't know what net zero looked like. So Jason shows me a UNICEF video, and there is this young lady, Aisha, and she's walking 8 hours a day, round trip, every single day, collecting water for her family. Why? Because they live a low-carbon lifestyle, which is where they want us, right? I'm like, no way, Jose, we're not going there. But they live that way by design because our globalists or global elitists say that they should not have access to fossil fuels, and they're going to stop giving them money if they start to utilize fossil fuels. So they're purposefully keeping them down low, and that's where they want us. And so when I see BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and all these guys say, we need to get to net zero and we need to push. And Larry Fink says that we've got to force behaviors on us. We're like, oh, no. We get it now. Because when we know who the enemy is, we can fight back, right? That's the first lesson in the war is when we know you, we will fight back. So that's what we're going to do. And And so today, I think it's really cool that Margaret saved this panel for last, because we've heard throughout the last couple of days about what's going on at the national level. You're hearing about the great people that are fighting the federal fight. We love what President Trump and his administration's doing. Amen? He's been pulling us out of these crazy globalist tyrannical agreements. So we're out of the Paris Climate Accord again, which is great. However, our states still seem to be bowing to it, and cities and counties and organizations and corporations. And so we, the people, need to actually know and understand exactly what's going on. And so this panel is for state and local policy solutions. And so what we're going to do is have each of these patriots come up and share a little bit with you about the fight they've been fighting, so that you don't have to recreate the wheel if and when it comes to your state, your county, your city. All right, so I'm going to start with each one. They're going to come up. They've got about 10 minutes each, and then at the end, we'll ask questions. Sound good? All right, great. First, we're going to start with Senator Mark Maynard, and it's a privilege to introduce him. He is is this not working? Hello? There we go. He is a principled defender of constitutional government and individual liberty. In addition to his service in the West Virginia Senate, Senator Maynard serves on the board of directors of the Blue Ribbon Coalition, a national organization committed to protecting Americans' access to public lands, pushing back against federal overreach. The coalition works to ensure that land management decisions respect historic use, rural economies, and the rights of citizens, rather than being dictated by the unelected bureaucracies through sweeping regulatory actions. Whether through advocacy, litigation, or engagement with Congress, they stand for accountable government and responsible stewardship rooted in access, local input, and the rule of law. Welcome, Senator Maynard.
Thank you so much, Molly. It's such an honor to be here around all of you patriots. It's just a true honor. Thank you, Margaret and Dan, for all the work. I know what it takes to put something like this together, and thank you for all the hard work you do. Let's give a round of applause to Margaret and Dan. One thing that Molly didn't mention in my bio is I was Trump's co-chairman for the state of West Virginia in 2016. I got to speak at a couple of his rallies, so imagine speaking to 10,000 people that are like you and have your values. I would have to stop, and when I would say something in favor of President Trump at the time, I would just have to stop while they just like, yeah, just yelled. So it was a great to be a part of that. Molly mentioned the ESGs, and there's also a debanking thing that's real too that we haven't mentioned here today. So we need to look into that. First off, too, I want to thank Bill Dalbo. He was so kind to me. I've been on Capitol Hill with him, and when you walk down the hallway, the senators and the congressmen speak to him by name, and he's so well respected. So when you have a topic that needs lobbying in D.C., he's your man, just like Margaret said. I'm also the chairman of the Congressional Prayer Caucus that was started by Congressman Randy Forbes. 15 minutes before floor session, we kind of took our model off of Congressman Forbes. We meet in the Senate President's conference room, and we talk about bills that are faith-based that we need to be for, or bills that we need to be against. We usually read a scripture and just take 15 minutes. We check all the other political conversations at the door, and it's great. We've got a couple pastors that serve on our Senate, and I'm proud to be a part of that. Also, like Molly said, I'm a board member for Blue Ribbon Coalition. Ben, Simone, and Matt, it's so proud to be with them and part of that group. I think it was divine intervention that put off Dan Taranjo's presentation until they were on the stage, because Chuck Walla has been such a hot topic with Blue Ribbon Coalition, and I actually learned a little bit more about it today. So that was great that he could be with them. I want to say something about bureaucrats that Bill started on, but the easiest way for bureaucrats to manage land is to close it. So that's one thing we do at BRC. We fight. It's our taxpayer land, so we should have a right to use it. I've been hearing discussions today, and I've added quite a few topics to my bills to introduce. like Bill said, we're in the middle of our 60-day session, and there's still time for me to introduce bills. So I got quite a few ideas today about bills that I can go back Monday and introduce. One thing that, and I'm not sure if this is the way it is with all states, but in West Virginia, we can introduce resolutions to Congress, and they can be either joint, which means House and Senate, or just Senate. Pass it off the floor, and it goes to D.C. Now, it doesn't mean anything goes into law, but to get all of our senators or all the House members on a resolution, it kind of, will escalate the situation a little bit. So keep that in mind. Check with your state legislature to see if you can introduce a resolution. It can, put some light on some subjects. The road closure thing, the Roadless Rule Act, I learned a little bit more. I should already know this being on BRC, but not only I want to oppose the road closure aspect of the roadless rule, but then they're going beyond that and allowing for zero development to retrieve natural resources or anything on his property. So not only is the rule to start with bad, but how they're overstepping the boundaries is something we need to look at. Director Ben Burr, I don't know if he's still here or not, but he stopped by West Virginia on the way here, and I helped him get some meetings with some of the chairmen where bills are in the committee that he feels strongly about. One of them is Senate Bill 751 that has to do with landowner rights. In West Virginia right now, there's case law that will make the landowner liable if he invites someone on their property just for social reasons or whatever. A lady fell off the porch, off the steps, there was no handrail. She sued and won. Now there's case law in West Virginia where if you invite somebody on for no monetary value, they can sue you, and there's case law to back that up. My bill, Senate Bill 751, takes away the liability and makes us be responsible for our own actions. I hate it. This is my thing is we are responsible for our own actions, and we need to be careful. My mom fell on a sidewalk one time outside of a pharmacy and blacked both of her eyes, but she wasn't injured. And I was like, Mom, you need to watch where you step. It was her fault. There was something she tripped on. So, that we just need to take responsibility for ourselves. One thing I want to bring to your attention, a few years ago, Environmental Partners Incorporated came to West Virginia, bought a tract of land adjacent to a wildlife management area. They sold it for carbon credits. They weren't even in business really in West Virginia. Then, once they got all the land mitigated to meet this carbon credit, and probably selling carbon credits from out of state, then they sold it to our state government for pennies on the dollar, and then our natural resources was then responsible for the land to keep that carbon credit continually going. And how I found out about this, they had to close a road that went through it that didn't meet the carbon credit requirements. And that's how I ended up finding out about it, because I fight to keep our roads open in the state. And the state officially abandoned the road. That's what the process is called in West Virginia. And through that, now this land is not going to be used for tax purposes. You can't reap any natural resources off the land. So keep your eye out for that in these states with the carbon credits. Stephanie mentioned the flood zone with her Zillow problem. We have that in West Virginia. This is something else for you to look at. Our county commissions in all 55 counties, through a federal program, designated floodplains and floodways. And without consultation of the property owner, they could say your property is in the flood zone and the floodplain and not allow you to build on it, not allow you to haul dirt and raise it to where you could build on it out of the flood zone. So I'm sure that's a federal program. Sometimes it was backroom deals, and if somebody that owned a piece of property could get their property actually in this system, then they could sell it to the federal government. So just keep your eye on your local floodplain. You can, it may really affect your land or being able to build on it. Also, I want everybody here I got a homework assignment for you. Find out who your state House representative is and find out who your state senator is. You need to know these things. Email them, introduce yourself, build a rapport, go to the Capitol once a year, set up a meeting with them, talk to them. Then when you have an issue, you have a little bit of name recognition. It's very important. Let alone what congressional district you live in. Find that out. Get to know your congressman through email, at least so they can see your name. You know, their staff sometimes will put them onto it. Set up a meeting, go to DC. Bill can introduce you. But it's very important to have a relationship with your state, local leaders, let alone Congress. Of course, it's a little easier to find out who your U.S. senators are because they cover the whole state and there's only 2 of them. But, and it doesn't hurt to find out, send them an email, you know, introduce yourself, tell them a problem you're having. And if it's something they feel strongly about, here's one other thing. I want to leave you with this. When you get to know your state representatives and you have something federally that is an issue, your state representatives have almost a direct line to your congressional representatives, and that can kind of get you in the door to Congress. But like Bill did, I'm going to offer my cell phone number. So my cell phone number is 304, get your pencils out, 304-360-6272. And I want to leave you with one thing. When you have an issue, ask your state, local leader to put this on their, if they feel strongly about it, you can get them to buy into it. Get them to put it on their letterhead. Send a snail mail copy, email copy to whoever it affects, maybe Congress. But that really makes a little difference. And if you get them to believe in you, it'll make a difference. And I will offer that to any of you. If you have a state, and I know you're thinking, okay, Senator Maynard, how are you going to help me in New Mexico? But if this issue is on my radar, according to the letter that I send them, they're like, oh my gosh, we better really watch what we do here. Somebody 1,800 miles away has their eye on us. So thank you so much. It's been an honor to be a part of this. Sorry I wasn't here yesterday, but I was making laws yesterday. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for telling us that we can call anytime. I'm sure a lot of people are going to take you up on that. But it's also very helpful, I know I've found, to know that I actually can reach out to my legislators because they do want help, because they're not all experts in every field. And they don't actually know how to back up every vote that they're voting on. And like, I know a lot of our congressmen have Jason Isaac's phone on speed dial. He gets a lot of calls, says this energy bill is up, I need some talking points, help me, and he does. And for all of you to be expert resources for your legislators would be amazing too. So I agree. Thanks for saying that. Please do call and introduce yourself to your legislators. Next, we're going to invite up Tracey Barton. Tracey has served as the executive director of the Kansas Natural Resource Coalition for the past 4 years, leading the organization's policy strategy on federal land use, water rights, and natural resource governance on behalf of Kansas counties. She works closely with county commissions, state agencies, and federal policymakers to strengthen the statutory coordination process and advance protections for private property rights under federal and Kansas law. Tracey has spent most of her life around agriculture and brings real-world experience to her policy work. She's also a licensed real estate agent and author, and has built strong working relationships with national leaders in private property rights advocacy. Please welcome Tracey.
Well, thank you, Molly, and it's an honor to represent Kansas counties, and thank you, Marquardt and Dan, for hosting this conference. It's so nice to be in a room full of friends fighting on the same battles. Well, I want to start out by telling you a little bit about the organization, Kansas Natural Resource Coalition, who we are, what we do, and why we do it. KNRC is a coalition of counties, and we're led by commissioners and we monitor, when appropriate, intervene to reduce the impact of the federal government on overreach as it relates to county members and their citizens in the area of human environment, natural resources, and land use. So in a nutshell, what we're doing is we're using local government at the county level to put a check on the federal agencies to make sure that they're following their own rules, because most of the time they're not. We represent a third of the state of Kansas, so we have 35 county members. Total county members in Kansas is 105. And so what we do on a regular basis, we're daily monitoring the Federal Register, keeping commissioners informed so they don't have to read 300 pages of technical information before breakfast. We're equipping our commissioners with tools, we're educating them on their authority, and keeping them informed. You know, what we're finding is the majority of commissioners don't realize that they have authority when it comes to the federal government's agencies. And that's one of the great things about what we've learned with, especially working with Marquardt and Dan. We've started a training program on coordination and how that works. And if you're not aware, the county government, according to NEPA, and as I understand FLPMA, we don't have a lot of federal lands in Kansas, but you have an equal seat at the table when it comes to coordinating on rule changes coming through the federal government. And so we do engage on some state issues as well as mainly federal is our focus. Economically in Kansas, 86 to 87% of our state land is agriculture based. Nationally, we're #1 in grain and sorghum and wheat production. We're third in cattle production, and we're in the top 10 for oil, top 15 in natural gas. And 98% of our lands are privately owned. I'm going to cover some of the recent wins that we've had in the last 2 years. And I'm going to hit these at a really high level. The first time I ran through this, it took me 25 minutes. So I'm limited to about 5 or 10 minutes. So if you have questions about these afterwards, let me know. The first one I want to talk about is the National Interest Electric Transmission Corridor. There was a line coming from, it started in Illinois and it ran all the way through Kansas, and then it connected to a line that went down to Oklahoma and Colorado. We developed policy for that, and and I should back up, that project was a 5-mile wide corridor that came across 20 Kansas counties using federal eminent domain. Now, eminent domain is supposed to be reserved for the states, but federal eminent domain was huge. We took direct action on that, and during phase 3, it was stopped, and we did that in partnership with American Stewards of Liberty. And then the second win I want to talk about is the Lesser Prairie Chicken Endangered Species Act listing. If you're not familiar with that, it's a bird. It covers a 5-state area: Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. In Kansas, it was listed as threatened, and we actually sued U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And our lawsuit was specific to the 4D rule. And if you're not familiar with the 4D rule, it's the arm of the Endangered Species Act that directly impacts private property rights. And so we challenged them on 3 different points and won on all 3. And so what the significance of the lawsuit is that now, according to this lawsuit, Fish and Wildlife Service has to consider the economic impact before applying the 4D rule going forward, which is a huge win, not only for Kansas, but for any other endangered species 4D rules upcoming. The third one that I'd like to talk about is and I think JD or Shad mentioned it earlier, was an EPA Clean Water Act effluent guidelines for meat processors. So there was a proposed rule that would have put the majority of small meat processors out of business. And I think you heard me mention earlier that Kansas, we're #3 in the nation's cattle production, and a lot of our meat producers take their cattle to local processors to be sold. So what we did was we partnered with American Stewards of Liberty. We worked with our Attorney General in Kansas, did some work in DC with the help of Bill Dolbo and Marquardt, and got the word out. And thankfully, the rule was withdrawn in August of last year, and there's an impact on our meat supply, on our food supply through that rule change as well. And then the last one that I wanted to talk about is an ongoing issue that we're working on, and it's with a national wildlife refuge that's stationed centrally in Kansas. And there's a current issue. So the wildlife refuge encompasses about 22,000 acres in the center of our state. And if you know a lot about Kansas, we're a pretty dry climate. But they've designated this land as a wetland, and when they, right after they identified it as a refuge, they came in with man-made bulldozing equipment to create waterways, and they now want to pump water into waterways that were never created to be waterways. Unfortunately, Fish and Wildlife Service, they filed for senior water rights before a lot of farmers realized that they needed to file for water rights, and they're now threatening farmers with a 30% reduction in water, and the majority of these people are crop irrigators. So this is impacting about 7 to 8 counties. We're calling it the Quivira water grab. It's a very complicated issue. There's multiple agencies involved. We've been working with Marquardt Byfield on a coordination effort, but we've got counties joining together. And I think that's one of the greatest benefits about our organization. When counties stand together and we fight issues like this, there's so much power in our voice. One of the things that they asked me to do, just moving on a little bit more, is identify some of the challenges that we have in Kansas. You know, I think from a county perspective, and I hear it all over as I travel across the state, is that we have a shrinking population and therefore a shrinking tax base. So we're faced with challenges with financial issues. And because of that shrinking population, there's a challenge to centralize or regionalize our government, which takes away the local voice. So I guess my challenge for you all is watch your bills that are going through your state legislators, and anytime you see authority being taken away from county commissioners or your city commission and putting it in the hands of a bureaucrat that's appointed, call and ask them to vote no. Do not allow that to happen, because then you lose control at the local level. You know, our government was designed to be from the bottom up, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's something you can do actively, is pay attention and get a hold of your legislators, making sure that local control stays in place in your state. So in closing, I just want to highly recommend that other states consider a commissioner-led, county-funded coalitions similar to KNRC. Organized local government makes federal overreach much more difficult. And if anyone has questions afterwards or would like more information, we would be glad to share with you what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. This is Liberty in action, folks. I love it. Next, I'd like to welcome up Garfield County Commissioner Perry Will of Colorado. And this man has the best coat in the house if you haven't seen his wolf coat. I wish you were wearing it right now. Commissioner Will brings nearly 40 years of experience as a Colorado wildlife officer, making him uniquely qualified to speak on predator management and wildlife policy. He and his fellow commissioners have called for a pause in Colorado's wolf reintroduction program, citing serious concerns about inadequate planning, growing impacts to ranchers, and the strain on rural communities that overwhelmingly opposed the measure. Commissioner Will has been clear. Colorado families must have the ability to defend their livestock, pets, and property, and wildlife policy must respect those who live and work the land. He is a strong advocate for responsible management that protects both wildlife and the rights of Colorado's ranching communities. Welcome, Commissioner Will.
Thank you, and I know I'm under the gun on time, so, but I still got to share a little, I like to start out when I speak, I like to tell a little joke, and this one has a little bit to do with the temperature in this room. So, there was these polar bears out on this big ice floe. A little baby polar bear comes up to his uncle. He says, "Unc, am I a full-blooded polar bear?" And his uncle says, "Well, of course, son, you're a full-blooded polar bear. Your mom's a full-blooded polar bear. Your dad's a full-blooded polar bear." He said, "Now go on and play." So the little polar bear wanders off across the ice floe a little further and runs into his mom. Comes up to his mom and said, "Mom, am I a full-blooded polar bear?" And she said, "Oh, son, of course you're a full-blooded polar bear. You come from a long line of full-blooded polar bears. You know, my mom and dad and their mom and dad are all full-blooded polar bears." And she said, "Now just go on and play." So the little polar bear, he goes off playing. Pretty soon he's out across the ice floe and he runs into his dad. Goes up to his dad, he said, "Dad, am I a full-blooded polar bear?" Well, his dad was like, "Oh, of course, son, you're a full-blooded polar bear. You know, I'm full-blooded polar bear. My whole entire lineage is full-blooded polar bear. Same with your mother." He said, "Why on earth would you ask a question like that?" Little polar bear says, "'Cause son of a gun, I'm cold." Anyway, that's really an icebreaker, I guess, for me talking. I do want to say that this is and give a hand for this. This is a great conference, and I've truly enjoyed it. Truly enjoyed meeting those of you that I have met here. And I'm a baby county commissioner. Molly talked about me spending 40 years as a game warden, and I spent about 6 years in the Colorado State Legislature. But I'm a baby county commissioner, so and I'm a first timer at the American Stewards of Liberty, so that will change. It won't be a first timer anymore. But Garfield County, just a little overview of our county, it's the fourth largest county, landmass wise, in the state of Colorado, with 63% public land in Garfield County. That's approximately 2,000 square miles of public land. And that's all federally owned by the Forest Service and the BLM. About 620,000 acres of BLM and about 520,000 acres of U.S. Forest Service. And Garfield County is located in the heart of the Piceance Basin, and I'm sure those with oil and gas understand that really well. But we have about 66 trillion cubic feet of natural gas in that basin, the second largest one, producible shale basin in North America. Our economy and cultural identity are deeply tied to our public lands and our natural resources, including energy, agriculture especially, recreation, and our wildlife resource. But the county's long upheld principles of coordination of multiple use and sustained yield across probably five decades or so of an engagement with our federal partners. And you probably ask, why does early and ongoing federal engagement matter? Active, consistent coordination with federal agencies ensures local interests are represented early in the process. That's critical. Represented early in the process before decisions are finalized. And you know, the typical cooperating agency, you probably well know about cooperating agency status and roles, but it relegated counties to passive commenters. That's not how we do it. In coordination under FLPMA and the U.S. Forest Management Act, it elevates local governments in the counties. They're true partners in decision making, and they need constant reminders of that. When you're dealing with them, they need constant reminders. So kind of the cowboy translation of that, you know, before 1976 when we had those, it was like we're gonna settle this country. Now after FLPMA, it's kind of like we're gonna manage this country. So that's kind of the gist of it. I talked about the early engagement, and it does help prevent, because we have really adverse social economic impacts, and that aligns with federal, state, and local objectives. But it's a hallmark of good governance. You know, I've asked in the past, you know, what's coordination mean under FLPMA, and they kind of say, well, we'll let you know what we decided. That's not the case. That's not how it works. And you know, we don't mind federal land management policy. It's just I just wish it didn't take 400 pages to say I can't fix the fence. So, you know, some of the key policy and engagements and lessons I think Garfield County's learned is federal policy shifts around our oil shale, our natural gas, and development directly tested Garfield County's economy and our resilience throughout our county. Right now, we dipped into our reserves just to make, we didn't have a balanced budget this go around, and we're dipping into reserves because of that, and it's over oil and gas revenues in our county. We're the second largest producer of natural gas in Colorado, and like I say, it's one of the biggest shale basins in the country. Garfield County has recognized the urgent need for structured, proactive federal engagement to preserve our reliance on these natural resources. And I want to bring up the greater sage-grouse policy, because I know we've been pretty involved with that with Garfield County. And but 16 years ago, the BLM's draft EIS on greater sage-grouse threatened our county's economic stability. It truly did. And we trust but verify position. That's what we always seek. But we sought to verify the science and coordinated directly with BLM and the state of Colorado. But Garfield County directly influenced all three BLM records of decision, developed Garfield County's greater sage-grouse conservation plan, and incorporated the best available local science that forced the feds to address it. So, you know, under Flipman, it kind of seems like it does, you know, that public land belongs to all Americans, but it seems like it's especially the ones who've never set foot on it. We experience that a lot. But it does say it belongs to everyone, but I can tell you that it kind of explains why most of the instructions we get about public lands come from zip codes that have no sagebrush. But we produced our own habitat map, and that was endorsed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife and adopted by the BLM, demonstrating that coordination can be successful, and it was. But the lesson we learned was county-developed, science-based local plans can lead federal outcomes when they're grounded in persistent coordination. But some of you are probably aware of the BLM Planning 2.0. Garfield County opposed elements of BLM's Planning 2.0 proposal that reduced local input and partnered with other western counties and legal advisors to draft a presidential order institutionalizing coordination in federal decision-making, a push for formal recognition of local roles. And they do have to listen to you from the ground, the local people on the ground, they do, and demand that, because it's in law that they have to do that. Garfield County was the only county invited to participate in a BLM National Association of Counties, NACO, memorandum of understanding elevating nationwide awareness of federal-local coordination obligations. So Garfield County's Federal Land Natural Resource Coordination Plan, this is the Bible I was handed when I became a county commissioner, and I'll share it with anyone that wants, or I'll hand you my copy, but this is a great plan that Garfield County has done for our natural resources coordination plans and policies. But this whole thing was a culmination of decades of experience working to protect our economics and our social values and our culture, and those need to be included in the federal decision-making things. So, I've also noticed that it seems like the farther someone lives away from the public land, the more certain they know about, the more certain they are about how they know how to manage it. And we need people on the ground managing that, and that's us, and that's Garfield County over our way. So, but this book sets forth the county policies. Under each of these, there's a policy for each, from wildlife, recreation, energy. We all have policies within the county, and we look at this constantly and said, this is what we're going to do. The wolf thing was mentioned there. With the wolves, our policy said we're not going to reintroduce wolves. Well, that got overridden from the governor and a lot of political interference. But it demonstrates how structured coordination plans can create a great policy and align with the governments across all government levels. We have quarterly state and federal land managers meetings. That's a really good thing. It brings together the agencies, federal and state. And so that way you have advance notice of any kind of policy developments and alignment with integrating federal, state, and local priorities early in the process. We do a lot of stakeholder collaboration. We engage energy, we engage recreation, agriculture, our ranching, our grazing, our conservation leaders to ground decisions in community values. So the core takeaways from what we've been doing is early engage often, and waiting until after federal plans are released, it's too late. It limits your local influence, but you got to do it from the inception of the project. Get involved, and it improves the outcomes for your counties, trust me. You leverage formal coordination. We talked about FLIPMA and FMA, provide the legal foundation requiring agencies to work with local governments. It's their obligation. They're required to. Hold them to that. Make sure you do. And it grounds decision in local science and builds credibility for into the future. It also institutionalized collaboration through policy, and our 2020 plan ensures future consistency, because county commissioners can change, and we have elections and different things. So it's that book ensures a future consistency and transparency and balance in managing our federal lands. As I say, 63% of our counties federal. There's lots of counties in Colorado that are well over 90% public land. So it's good governance, it's consistent, and it's a cooperative framework, and it leads to durable, balanced public land solutions, and I think we're doing that in Garfield County. And I want to say for the American Stewards of Liberties, they serve as an immeasurable partner with the county in all of our efforts, and I'd have to say efforts and resulting successes that Garfield County has had. So thank you, Dan and Marga, that's great. Your guidance and insights been just wonderful for the county. And when I got elected, I felt like I already knew you two from I heard so much about it and what you've done for our county. But it's going to be a good ride. I'm excited to be a county commissioner in Garfield County. I can tell you that Garfield County is the tip of the spear for counties in Colorado, and we're going to keep it that way, and we're going to keep doing the right things for all the right reasons. So, God bless you. That was my time, Mom.
Yes. Thank you for the jokes. Also, and for all you do and for sharing your manual. I'm sure that will come in very helpful. We do not want to recreate the wheel here. We don't have time for that. So thank you. Next, it's my honor to introduce my representative, Carrie Isaac. Whether helping start youth programs, supporting community events, advocating for healthier families through wellness initiatives, Representative Isaac believes in rolling up her sleeves and getting to work. While in college, she met the love of her life, the Carbon King, Jason Isaac, and they've now been married 25 years, proud parents of 2 sons currently in college. Representative Isaac's currently running for her 3rd term in the Texas House. She was recently named Courageous Conservative and a Faith and Family Champion. She also serves as chair of the Texas House Freedom Caucus. She serves on the Homeland Security Committee, where she's worked hard to protect Texas land from foreign adversaries. She's also a founding member of the Texas House Water Caucus, focusing on water protection, infrastructure funding, and conservation. Representative Isaac has also served on the Elections Committee to strengthen election integrity. She's received recognition from the Texas State Rifle Association, was honored with the Lone Star Health Champion Award for her work as the founding chair of Maha Texas Caucus. Representative Carrie Isaac brings perseverance to everything she does, the same endurance and resilience that carried her across the finish line of a grueling 140.6-mile Ironman triathlon, and she brings that same energy to her constituents every day. So please welcome Carrie Isaac.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure being here with you. First, I'm going to talk about a few things that we've passed in the Texas legislature, and then I'm going to talk about a bill that I actually killed and I'm very proud of, and then just mention some things that we'll be working on. So I did serve on the Homeland Security Committee, and we passed a bill which addresses foreign ownership of Texas land. This legislation restricts the Chinese Communist Party, along with other foreign adversaries, from purchasing or acquiring real property in the state of Texas. Yes, it's a great win, another win. Specifically, it applies to individuals, governments, and entities tied to countries that the U.S. Director of National Intelligence has designated as national security threats. Currently, that list includes China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And another big win in this legislation was that we gave our governor here, Governor Abbott, the ability to expand the list. So this would just allow him to update it quickly if new threats emerge. So that was a big win. Yes, yay. We also passed a bill that creates a pathway for certain property owners to vote on whether they want to remain within city limits after being annexed without their consent. The law applies only to specific annexed areas right now, particularly those annexed by cities with population of more than 500,000 or more. Last session, we passed a bill that, well, I actually couldn't believe we needed, because it's just common sense, but sometimes, common sense is rare, unfortunately. But this bill, I had constituents complaining that they were not watering their lawns during water restrictions. We're in a drought here in Texas, if you don't know that. And their POAs were fining them for having brown grass. Ridiculous. So we passed a bill that will not allow POAs to fine you for having brown grass. And then I also amended the bill on the floor that said that they can't make you, if it's new construction, they can't make you install the grass during a drought. That was another win. One of my constituents reached out to me, my office, and said they had squatters in their home. This was a $1 million home. The supposed buyers were from out of state. They were wiring the money. They were also sending digital copies of the documentation. And it's been a while back. I don't remember exactly how, but somehow I think it was a real estate agent gave them access to the property before the documentation was completed, and they never paid a dime. And they took possession of that home. Yes. So I educated myself really quickly about the squatter issue. It's pretty widespread. I was shocked. I found that squatters often move into vacant homes without permission. They use fake leases, fraudulent documents. There's criminal squatter groups that target investment properties and short-term rentals. And they get very creative. I listened to some committee hearings in Texas and listened to property owners in Texas talk about, their stories. And I'll never forget this one lady. I just couldn't believe it. She told me, or not me, but she was telling the legislators that she bought a home and was doing some renovations. I think she was doing new flooring and stuff. And the contractor asked if he could stay in the home while he was renovating it, and she let him, and he decided he wanted to stay and not leave. So under prior law, law enforcement often viewed these disputes as civil matters. So law enforcement couldn't remove occupancy immediately. A law enforcement officer was explaining at these committee hearings that the people in the home will show them a document. The people saying this is my home would show them a document. They weren't sure who had the real documents, unfortunately. So owners had to file eviction cases, court timelines. They could stretch weeks, months. Meanwhile, unlawful occupants just remained in possession of these homes. Some homeowners testified in front of the legislature saying that it even took them a year or more to get people out of their property. So for many owners, this means loss of rental income, property damage often, and legal fees, of course. So to combat this, we passed legislation which helps courts and law enforcement quickly identify true squatters versus tenants disputes. It establishes a more streamlined eviction and removal process for unauthorized occupants. So it gives faster court reviews, less documentation required, quicker hearings, and the ability to challenge fraudulent leases immediately, and clears law enforcement authority on in these trespass situations. So Texas is the most property right protected groundwater state, and we are in a drought. You know the saying that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting? That's true here in Texas, no doubt. And in the legislature, sometimes some of the biggest wins for property rights aren't bills that are passed, they're actually bad bills that are stopped. And last session, I'm proud to say that I killed a bad bill twice in the same session. The first time was in committee. I was able to convince our speaker not to move the legislation for a vote. But later on in the session, a Democrat legislator who lives hundreds of miles away from the district that I serve and the groundwater conservation district impacted, he later revived it quietly, attaching the language to another piece of legislation on the House floor, third reading, which means very late, very often not done. I mean, it's not very common. No debate, no reference to the groundwater conservation district. So this bill would have allowed a groundwater conservation district in the district that I serve to come onto private property without owner's consent, meter private-owned wells, and increase fees automatically every year. Yes, so a few hours later when I realized that this language just passed as part of a larger bill, I immediately took action and requested a reconsideration vote to try to stop it. Unfortunately, every Democrat in the Texas House and a handful of Republicans voted together to block my reconsideration. But I wasn't willing to stop there. I quickly drafted a letter to the governor urging him to veto the bill, and I worked the floor to build support. I ended up with more than 40 of my legislative colleagues to sign on to my request. And State Representative Wes Verdell was here earlier. He helped me. He voted for the reconsideration. He signed onto the letter, and then Secretary Rollins' mom, Helen Curran, she was here yesterday. She also helped me with this effort. I'm very thankful for their support. So, on the very last day of the veto period, Governor Abbott vetoed the bill. Yes. I was with family at a family reunion, and we had a little veto celebration. But my family, most of them didn't know what a veto was, but they celebrated with me anyway. So Governor Abbott's statement said, "This amendment singles out property owners in one groundwater conservation district and subjects them to new burdens for exercising private property rights, like new fees that increase every year and entry onto property without owner's permission." So some of the issues I'll be working on and with my colleagues, sometimes you never know if it's you or your colleague, but it's a group effort oftentimes. We're working on the issues of where cities are buying land outside of their boundaries and then putting conservation easements on them. Municipal water supply corporations, they're leasing their eminent domain authority to for-profit entities to build pipelines. High voltage transmission lines are currently threatening a lot of private property rights right here in Texas. And as the Maha Caucus chair, the country of origin labeling for sure. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Isaac, for fighting back on all of that for it. You know, we're behind you with the 765 transmission lines as well. And Margaret Byfeld and I have talked extensively about those because the NHTSA national interest electric transmission lines, they're not just trying to do it at a federal level. They're not just trying to do it in you know, Oklahoma and all these other different states. They're doing it in Texas too. I mean, they literally, every single state, they're using the same playbook to come after us and take our private property rights. And they say it's for electricity. They say it's for energy. They say it's for whatever they want to say it's for, birds, animals. We know it's a land grab, but we're on to them. And remember that the darkness cannot stand in the light. So we are here to shine the light. So, next I'd like to invite up Frank Lasse. He is a former Wisconsin state senator and former member of Governor Scott Walker's administration. The district he represented had 2 nuclear power plants, a biomass plant, and numerous wind towers. He has experience dealing with energy, the environment, and the climate, and Frank is now the president of Truth in Energy and Climate. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Well, everyone, first off, just take a really deep breath and let it out like a sigh. Now do it one more time. You've just released 80,000 parts per million of CO2 and even more water vapor, which is the dominant greenhouse gas. I'm going to, real quick, I've got my 10 minutes. Let me get my timer on here. I've got my 10 minutes, but I'm going to try to tie all this together a little bit from watching this and talk about natural asset companies and limiting conservation easements and why that's important. But how this all ties together is why does it feel like, and we've been talking here, about energy being under attack, about private property rights being under attack, about beef and food being under attack, and even water being under attack. And the UN talks about water being the next big thing. Water shortage, water's going to be terrible, water, water, water. Why are those things, and why focus on that? And so much of what we're talking about in the details is driven by those, the attack on our food supply, energy supply, water supply, and all of that goes around with it. And ultimately what they want to do is get us regular citizens to a place where we'll accept CO2 rations. They're putting in place, and people say, well, you know, if I said this 5 or 10 years ago, I would have thought I was this crazy conspiracy person. But they are putting this in place. The largest bank in Australia has about 23% of their market, sends all of their customers on their debit and credit card activity a monthly carbon report. And by the way, calling carbon, CO2 carbon, is like calling water hydrogen. It's misuse of the English language, but they do it because it's good marketing. They're beta testing a card that will track all CO2 from everything we do, like watching Netflix, calling your friend, being on flying, walking, breathing, clothes, everything. They're doing this on purpose, and then they're going to sell it to us. The big financial interest, this is going to create a multi-trillion-dollar annual churn that the financial institutions can siphon off 2 or 3 or 4%. So they're looking at it as a great big money grab. And how they're going to sell it to us is, grandma, you have a low CO2 lifestyle because you're retired, you don't drive to work, you don't fly, you don't buy a lot. You can make money, or you can gift your CO2 credits to your children and grandchildren. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. You mean I'll make money off of this? Now, other people, regular people, and this is how they'll use it as well, is when you get to the end of the month, they'll say, gee, you don't have any more carbon credits, so you can't fill your gas in your car, but you can charge your electric motorbike. Can't buy beef, but you can buy bugs. And they are, by the way, working towards putting bugs in our food supply. They're going to call them arshetta, by the way. That is the name of crickets, their scientific name. So they've been working on the bug processing. So they're doing this to get control. This is all about control, and you all feel this. All of this is about this control. And natural asset companies popped up, and they're part of this control agenda. And I think that there's been a legitimate use for conservation easements, and we have a lot of them around the country, but they're also figuring into this because they can be used for carbon credits, which are very opaque, but they're out there because big companies are buying them. And all the data centers that they're building are going to increase the pressure for more carbon credits. Because these big woke companies like Meta and Microsoft and Amazon all claim they're going to be carbon neutral by 2030 or 2040. But how do you run? Meta, for example, is building 3 natural gas plants for 2.2 gigawatts of power in Louisiana. But they're going to claim that's carbon neutral because they're going to go out and buy carbon credits someplace. So they're going to spend big bucks and they're going to charge all of us for it. We'll all pay for it when they use your products. But that's how that works. So I think that that is going to increase the pressure, because one avenue to do that is using conservation easements. If you have an existing one, it's kind of safe. It's not very easy to claim carbon credits from something that already exists. But if you go start a new conservation easement, and people give them away for the tax credits, that's why they do it. They give it away for the tax credits, and you get less property tax locally because it devalues your land by 30 to 40%. So there's less property taxes paid, so you get a benefit there as the owner who granted this, gave it away, but you also get your federal tax deduction for it, for the value of it that you gave away. So they don't pay you for it. So they can take that then and prevent any future development or any future use for it of any development and claim a carbon credit for it and sell those. That's what I believe they're going to start doing. That was the reason for stopping natural asset companies under the Biden regime. We had the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, were inventing and put out a rule to establish NACs, to establish natural asset companies. Concept being is going out on Wall Street, raise billions and billions of dollars, and go out and buy up a whole bunch of land to sequester carbon, however they could do that, to sell the credits. Now, we pushed that back on the federal level. 3 states have passed it, and I'm going to have to put some more effort into it. That's something that I do, is helping states and state legislators understand this issue. 3 states, Nebraska, Kansas, and South Dakota, have passed anti-NAC state laws. But other states haven't, and largely it died away because the SEC withdrew it. They said, okay, it's not ready for prime time, we won't do it. Well, it's not going to happen under Trump. If we vote in a wrong next president, all this stuff is going to come back as a cascade. So you want to pressure and do the things that you've been hearing here, get engaged, stay engaged, get to know your state and federal reps as you can. Your states are easier, and they do. Call them up. You'd be surprised. I'd like to meet you for breakfast. I'd like to stop by. You don't even have to go to them. If you live in the district, where can I meet you? They'll put you off on staff and have them set an appointment. Sit down with them, and again, you've heard some great events on what to do with that. Easements. North Dakota is the only state that has I guess one other state, forget which one it was, has if it's not stated in the contract, but it will be stated in the contract, because they want to get the federal tax deductions. It has to be in perpetuity to get the federal tax deduction. In North Dakota, it's limited to 99 years. And yesterday you heard Representative Hageman talk about limiting it to 30 years. And Craig Rucker, who you talked with, he and I work closely, CFACT and Truth in Energy and Climate. I, with my legislative experience, draft up these bills, draft up the ideas, and work them through an organization called ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. And they have state legislators from around the country meet. When I was in the legislature, I was very involved with that. And they work on model legislation and work it through a committee process, and they vote on the public sector side and on the private sector side. And if they pass both sides, then it becomes model legislation. And often, even though getting in the room, even when they fail, we introduce this idea to legislators across the state. So some of the ideas we've been bringing forward don't always get to be model legislation, like our limit of 20 years on conservation easements. And we got a lot of pushback from people who work in the cattle grazing. They want their easements so they can keep grazing their cattle. They aren't seeing the bigger picture that I think is going to be happening with the pressure that we're going to see from these data centers, which are going to really put a lot of pressure because these woke companies aren't changing their wokeness. They're just going underground while our president is here. So you can get more if you're interested in this. I have a weekly newsletter that you get, and I give you 5 climate and energy, mainly energy and climate issues. And I make it easy for you, we do, for you to see and read. We give you 5 bullet points and a link to the original article. So you can skim through it, because as a legislator, I didn't have a lot of time. Most people don't. but it can give you, even reading the headlines, it'll give you an idea of what's going on in the world. So you can sign up at our website, Truth in Energy and Climate. But these are important topics. You've been hearing a lot of it, and we really need to be pushing back on this. And just to leave you with something, so why aren't conservatives concerned about CO2? Because we know it really helps plants grow a lot better, and we're helping them out one steak and one truck trip at a time. And then I'd like to point you to this. You all got this in your packets, and they're floating around, but this is a really great explanation from this organization, the American Stewards for Liberty, but the conservation easement or servitude. I think this is a really great explanation for you to understand it a little bit better. And some of you are landowners, so you might consider doing this. I think you should reconsider if you do. And some of the downside of it is that if you do, you lose control. Complete control. And the most egregious example of that happened in Virginia, where a woman had a conservation easement. She lived on the land that had a conservation easement, and she had a birthday party for a bunch of kids, and they released balloons, and she got in trouble from the conservation easement holder because their contract says that you can't put anything into the woods, so nothing can go on the property. And that's the sort of control you have and you give up. You might be able to maintain your fences, but you may not be able to put in new ones. And remember, the contract you're going to sign, if you are, or any of your neighbors, is forever, in perpetuity. So we're going to come back and we're going to work with Representative Hageman and look at 30 years and try to get this through as model policy again and reintroduce that to the state legislators across the country. So thank you all for being here, folks. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Save the balloons. All right, next I want to welcome up Otero County Commissioner Vicki Marquardt of New Mexico. Commissioner Marquardt has been a strong advocate for restoring local input in federal land decisions that directly impact her county. She's worked to defend grazing allotments for ranching families affected by U.S. Forest Service reductions, pushed for stronger coordination and stewardship opportunities between counties and federal agencies, and raised concerns about federal wildlife and land use policies that affect rural economies. Her focus is simple but important: protecting local communities, preserving working lands, and ensuring decisions made in Washington do not undermine the people who live and work on the land every day. Welcome, Commissioner Marquardt.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's been a long day, and I'm going to talk to you about something a little bit different today. I know ICE has been in the news a lot, and all my peeps from New Mexico that are here, you're going to know about HB 9. It just passed the House and the Senate in Santa Fe. If there was an Olympic sport for being stupid, Santa Fe could send a team. It's so bad. It is so bad. What HB 9 is called is the Immigrant Safety Act. What I call it is the Screw the Counties and Make the Liberals Feel Better Act. I got a telephone call the other day and said, hey, we want to do an interview with you on Univision. And I thought, wow, this ought to be rich, because they're not exactly my cup of tea. So the reporter called and set me all up and everything, and so she was really nice, and she was asking me questions, and she said, okay, how is HB 9 going to affect immigration? I said, it's not. And you know those cartoons that go blink, blink, when the eyeballs are like, what? That's what she did. She goes, what do you mean? It's not going to change anything. I said, well, it's not. ICE is still going to be rounding up illegal aliens. ICE is still going to be detaining illegal aliens. ICE is still going to deport illegal aliens. We have a facility in Otero County, New Mexico that has a superior rating. You're going to take these detainees out of our superior rated facility. You're going to send them to Alligator Alcatraz, the Louisiana lockup, the new tent city they're putting up in El Paso, Texas, just right down the road from our facility. So you're telling me you're doing this for humanity and to be humane, and you're going to send them to a facility that doesn't have near the oversight that my facility has? That's what I'm saying. It's just to make the liberals feel better. We built this facility in 2007. Took out some bonds on it. We still owe just a little under 20 million bucks on it. So if we default on these bonds, it kills the county's credit rating. So we have some amazing people that are fighting for us in Santa Fe, one of our senators in particular. And so he called me the other day and he said, girl, I got you $2 million. And I said, buddy, that doesn't even service the bond. We need $6 million a year. And so he kept fighting and fighting, so he calls me back. He said, okay, I got you some more money, but they're not going anymore. So he got me enough to service the bond for 1 year. So he said, but I don't know, we're going to have to fight for this every year. And I said, we got till 2028 and the bond's paid off. And he said, I know, but that's all they're going this year. So I said, okay, but I mean, we're not going to end there because this isn't right. Otero County built that in 2007. We've kept it up for 19 years. We've done the maintenance on it. We've spent a fortune on the maintenance because it's a 215,000 square foot facility. And these idiots in Santa Fe tell me, well, just repurpose it. Do something else with it. And I'm like, you think frickin' Holiday Inn is going to move in there and make a hotel? I mean, we got concrete floors, we got concrete tiling walls, we've got concrete roofs. Nobody, I mean, it's a detention facility. That's what it was built for. Not to mention it's right next door to the Otero prison that's got the razor wire fence, so I'm not sure anybody wants to stay at a hotel next to a prison. So it's just been a big mess. So to me, that's just really a big state overreach. And the senator that I was talking to told me, he said, it's a hard fight for this money because the people in Santa Fe don't want to give you anymore because they want to punish you for having that facility. So I said, okay, so as a county government, how am I going to ask people to come in and do more investment in my county when they see what you just did to one of our main businesses? You just shut them down. So how do you encourage people to come in and say, hey, yeah, I want to go to Otero County, New Mexico? So it's been a goat rope, and it's been going on for several years, and they finally got it passed this year, and the governor couldn't sign it fast enough because she's on her way out, and she wants to make her big statement before she leaves. So that's kind of my issues with the state government. And then I also wanted to bring up our ranching community that I have a big heart for. It's Spike and Kelly Goss, and I know some of you in here may know them. And I know the King family in Washington is facing the fight that the Gosses are facing. Spike and Kelly have a grazing allotment in the Sacramento Mountains, which is in my county. They've got 200 sections of land, which all of you know it's about 640 acres a section, so they got about 128,000 acres of land. They started out with 553 head that they could graze. The Forest Service has cut them back to 150 head. And we fought like hell last year because they tried to cut them back to 103. And we literally went to battle with the Forest Service, and they finally agreed to let them keep 150 because it's just not sustainable. They can't make a living. And a lot of this, well, not a lot of it, all of it, has to do with the Endangered Species Act. They've got the Mexican spotted owl on their allotment, and now they got the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse, which is not up there. They've completely fenced them off about 200 acres of their prime water to keep the cattle off. This is a 3-row pipe fence with metal cabling in between the pipes, concreted into the earth, and it's about 200 acres that they've fenced off of their water. So I was up there with the Forest Service, and I said, you know, I want to see that mouse. I need to see me one of these. I've lived here my entire life. And they said, well, we don't really know if there's mouse, but this is a really good habitat if they come back. So I was up there the other day with one of the state reps, and we were driving around on his side-by-side, and we come cruising up to this guy, tree hugger, got the hat on, barefoot, got his tent, and he's on their grazing allotment. So Spike was with us, and he's a little hot. This guy's on his grazing allotment, and the gate was open, so don't ever leave a rancher's gate open. So Spike was a little hot. So State Rep Harlan Vincent, he tells me, he goes, I got this. Let me go talk to this guy. So he goes over and he said, what are you doing? He said, I'm trapping some mice. He said, really? He said, yeah. He goes, those New Mexico metal jumping mice. Because he's got all these little long, skinny metal traps. So Harlan says, so how long you been here? And he goes, I've been up here 3 weeks. And he said, I'm just gathering my traps. And he said, how many mice did you catch? 0. And the guy that works for the Forest Service said, there are no mice up here. He said, I've been up here before, there's no mice up here. So when I asked the Forest Service about that, I said, so you're going to keep them off their water for a non-existent mouse that may or may not ever come back? I said, as far as I know, when something's not here and it's extinct, I haven't seen any new dinosaurs. So I'm pretty sure they're not coming back. And it's also in the area of the Mexican spotted owl. So the Gosses are just fighting a uphill battle with the government. And it's just really sad that United States citizens have to fight their government to protect a non-existent mouse, and they're trying to shut down their grazing allotment. So I know that you guys have heard this all day. I know that we've talked about it. I'm preaching to the choir. But I do ask you to really stand up for our ranching and our farming community, because they're killing us. And that NHTSA corridor that Commissioner Perry's going to be talking about, we've got one in New Mexico too. It starts in Colorado, comes down the whole eastern side of the state, and ends up in my county. It's about 28 million acres of land, and it comes right through our prime agricultural land and the Permian Basin oil and gas. Tell me that's not part of their plan. So when they want to shut that down, and some of that corridor is 125 miles wide. It would take out an entire counties in New Mexico. So I know a lot of you know all this, and Commissioner Perry will talk more about that NHTSA corridor, but I just want all of y'all to stay in prayer. And you know, I've been thinking a lot lately. I know we're all here for a time such as this. So every day I just say, send me, Lord. Just send me. Thank you.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you, Commissioner Marquardt. Okay, the last one, Commissioner Michael Perry, also with New Mexico, is running for New Mexico State Land Commissioner. Woohoo! Commissioner Perry brings real-world land management experience and proven public service to the role. As the owner of Wildlife and Habitat Prescriptions, he works hand-in-hand with ranchers across New Mexico to implement responsible, science-based land and habitat solutions that balance economic opportunity with environmental stewardship. He currently serves as the vice chair of the Chaves County Commission and sits on the National Association of Counties Public Land Advisory Committee, where he advocates for common sense land policy, public access, and local control. He's also worked closely with the local, state, and federal partners to advance proactive forest and watershed management strategies that reduce wildfire and flooding risks that protect lives, property, and the land itself. Married to his wife, Kimberly, for 30 years, Michael raised his son, Colton, with a deep respect for New Mexico's land and the families who depend on it. Rooted in rural New Mexico, he understands that sound policy directly impacts landowners, sportsmen, and local communities. He's committed to protecting property rights and preserving our rural way of life for future generations. Welcome, Commissioner Perry.
Man, that sounded good. I hope I can live up to that. I tell you, being from New Mexico, as Ms. Vicki said, it's tough over there. It's real tough over there on conservative folks. And if there was this many conservative folks in one room in New Mexico, we'd call it the primary convention. That's just kind of how it would work. So we're from Chaves County. We have 4 commissioners here right here. And I'm going to talk a little bit, try to sew all this stuff in, but we've only got 5 commissioners and 4 of them are here. So you can tell how important this organization is and the spirit of this organization is to us. Because we really, really have to keep up the Western way of life that is so much going by the wayside in some of the rural economies in this state. So we're here to really do our best to keep up what you guys are doing and give you the tools that you can accommodate the needs in the field. Now, Chaves County is in southeastern New Mexico, and the major metropolitan area there is Roswell. And Roswell, if you don't know what that is, that's the first place that we had a little flying saucer and green undocumented aliens. That's the first green undocumented aliens in the United States. And I don't know if she said it, but I was a game warden for 22 years, and I had a lot of people ask me, have you ever seen any aliens? Have you ever seen any aliens over there? And I said, I've never seen a green one. I've never seen a green one. But to add on this game warden's joke, you ever caught a polar bear in a cage trap or a foothold? You have not. Well, I'm going to tell you how to do that. If you need to do that, if you ever need to catch a polar bear, you just cut about a 12-inch circle in the hole, and then you put green peas about an inch apart all the way around the hole. And when the polar bear comes to take a pee, you kick him in the ice hole. That's how you get it done. So as a game warden, you had to have clean jokes for the kids, right? You had to have clean jokes for the kids. But what I wanted to do is tie all of this in and really talk about, we've had a couple of folks talk about the national interest electric corridor, transmission corridor, and the impacts that it's going to have on our state. And what we're trying to do is negate that. We're trying to be very oriented and very methodical. And I guess the way I want to tie this in is say a lot of the mechanisms, a lot of the tools that we've used is because we come to conferences like this. Like I said, there's 4 of us here. And we try to get the expertise and the education so we can actually have the ability to make an effective change. And have we done that is what we have to really think about. How do you learn all of these tools that we get taught with this beautiful event, and how do we put those into use? And have we put those into use? And I'll tell you why there's an importance in it. I told you we're from a democratic state. It's pretty much a one political state in New Mexico, and it's not on our side. We have gone and spoken to, we don't have one state elected leader in New Mexico. We don't have one U.S. senator, or we don't have one representative. It's an all Democratic, totalitarian state, I guess you could say. So for us being conservative, it's a little tough to try and get things done. If you can imagine, it's really tough for us to get things done. So what we did is we went to the National Association of Counties, and well, first thing we did is we got with our neighboring counties, a lot of them are right here in this room, and we made sure that we're in concert, we're all on the same team. We're all fighting the same fight. And we did that. We got, how many counties, Bill, that signed off on a resolution?
We have the 8 that are part of the pathway, plus we got, I think, 3 others. So I think we have 12 or 13.
We got 12 of 12 New Mexico counties that signed off on our resolution. So we wanted to make sure that we circled the wagons and got all of our folks in the same saddle, so to speak. Then when we went to Washington, we visited with our congressional delegates, and we didn't get any kind of a warm welcome, did we? It was cold. It felt like going into the Democratic pre-primary is what it felt like, didn't it? So it was a little tough on us, but we went ahead, and because we have to touch those bases. So our next base was we went to the National Association of Counties, and I sat on the Public Lands Advisory Committee, and we got a resolution introduced. And it was a little bit hard because we had to be in 3 or 4 different places. We split our constituents up, and all of us went a different direction, and lo and behold, it got passed and it got adopted. And then I think Bill was lucky enough to go and introduce that on the national level. I'll just say it like as plainly as I can. And why it's important and what sews all this in is we had 13 counties from New Mexico support it. Our governor didn't support it. Everybody was against us. But we had 3,200 counties across the United States that supported our resolution. That's why what we're doing here is important, because sometimes we feel like we're the lone whitey on the county commission not getting to do very much. But if you really pay attention to your constituents and you do what's right on a daily basis and you try to do the right thing by the people and the resource and the agricultural interests, you can really make a difference. Now, we haven't killed this thing yet, but we have definitely set the pause button, and we're keeping the polite pressure. And I remember when Miss Marquardt asked me to go to the mule shield stuff, I remember talking to some people over there on the sidebar, and they said, you know, you got a lot of experience in natural resources. What's the one thing? What's the one thing that we really need to do? I said, well, you need to get Trump back in there. That's just what you got to do. That's all you got to do. You got to get this administration out there and get one that's a little more friendly to the agricultural resources, because those are the things that this administration holds dear and value is your folks, you interest in this room. And we got to make sure we keep that pressure going the right direction, keep saying the right things in the polite way, learning all these valuable things that we're learning here, and putting a golden string through all of that stuff, putting it in a nice little bow and getting a resolution passed. or doing something professional, and that's what we've been trying to do here. Now, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know we've been here a long time, and I know a little bit of you guys are tired, and I don't have any more polar bear jokes. But what I will say is I very much appreciate you guys for putting this on. I very much appreciate the interest in this room and the dedication of the folks that serve up here on these panels and in these political, we're making a lot of money on this stuff, right? I mean, this is the way we do it. So thank you guys for being you, and we're going to try to keep being us. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Great panel from all over. We've got time for 2 questions.
My name's Bill Williams. I'm the Chaves County, New Mexico manager. I want to point out a couple things that were said because I think it's really important that we understand that. Somebody said, don't recreate the wheel. Our counties are standing together, and there are some exemplary examples of that right up here. Garfield County, Colorado is one of our go-to counties, has been for years. They continue to do things. I have a great opportunity to work not only with Chaves County, because say we've got 4 out of 5 here, but I get to work with all the other counties in New Mexico. I kind of like Bill Dobro's thing about being a grassroots, person. That's really cool, and I'm glad for that. But I really want to point out that this goes beyond just our local counties. Like I say, Garfield County, Custer County is back here. They've helped us with many things over the years. But I want to do a shout out to Tracey Barton. When we came up against the NHTSA corridor stuff, I tend to write probably more than I should, resolutions in New Mexico and share them with others, and we mix and match things. But Tracey Barton handed us hundreds of pages of information that were very valuable to us in this fight. The reason we got a resolution passed in Washington at the NACO convention is because of stuff that Tracey gave us. Of course, we always work with Margaret and Dan. They're our first go-to. They connect us with all these people, but I just want to say thank you so much for what you did for us.
Fantastic. One more, way over here. Thank you. Meet me halfway. Come on. I'm just kidding. I am just kidding. I'm coming. I'm not very funny, or I'd say a joke, but I don't have any off the top of my head. I like the polar bear.
So my name is Kim Perry. I'm also from Chaves County, and I work for Congresswoman Yvette Harrell, and I noticed today a lot of people have said it's important to make those relationships with your local legislators. One of the things to keep in mind is they have field representatives throughout the state, throughout their districts. Make friends with them. They are great contacts because a lot of times you can't get through to them. They are busy, but if you call us, we're a direct line to them. Just keep that in mind. Thank you guys for what you're doing.
Fantastic. Thank you guys very much. Give them a round of applause.
Any other questions? Okay. Margaret, you're coming up. I just want to say thank you all so very much for your time today. And thank you, as Margaret said yesterday at the very beginning, you said that not only do we stand on the shoulders of giants, we are surrounded by giants. You are all giants. And I just want to say that my prayer for all of you is the same as the prophet Elijah's was for his servant. He said, Lord, please open their eyes so they can see that there are more with us than there are with them. And I want you to know that you are not alone. So look around this room and remember that whenever you start to feel weary, you do have partners. You have God. You have the truth, you have the Constitution on your side, and you have all of us. So God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you
Amen.
all.
Thank you. Thank you all. This is a great panel. I love this. I think this is a great panel to close out the conference. Had a lot of good ideas, a lot of people who are working very effectively. So I know we've been here for 2 days, and you guys have heard me talk plenty. You don't need to hear a lot, so I'm just going to make this short and sweet. First off, our sponsors, there is no way we could have put this on without our sponsors, so please, please thank them. Please thank them with a round of applause. And I want to say our speakers, fabulous speakers. I've been hearing, yeah, thank you. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about how this is such a great conference, and I just have to tell them, well, when you're working with this caliber of speakers, what do you expect, right? Makes it very easy for us. And I want to say one thing that I really appreciate is our speakers stay, and they've been able to mingle with you guys. You guys have been able to talk to them in the breaks, and that's what makes the Leadership Summit. Because the caliber of our speakers, the reasons they're so good is because they never stop learning. And I guarantee you they've learned as much from you as you've learned from them. And that's why this movement is strong. So thank you to the speakers. I just want to remind you, maybe some of you have heard me tell this story before, but we are in the 250th year of our nation. And that kind of gives me chills when I think about that. But I also think about the responsibility on our shoulders. You probably know in the history of civilization, nations don't live beyond 250 years. If you study the history, they turn over. That responsibility to continue the greatest nation ever established is on our shoulders. But I think the reason that we can be successful is because we're different as a nation. When our nation was founded, our founders chose God. That was our foundation of our nation. No other nation did that. Our founders also ensured that it would be the people that owned the land and not government. That's key to us retaining our liberty and retaining this country. And that's really the message I want to leave you with. And I'm going to read parts of a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote when he was in Paris in 1785 in October. And let me give a background to this story. So he was an ambassador in France, and as he often did, he would walk through the countryside, and he was, he loved nature, he loved architecture, he was great farmer, cultivated a lot of things on his own property. And so he would always take that in when he took his walks. Well, on one of these walks, he met up with this very poor lady, and she was walking to the next town, and they struck up this conversation. And he learns that she had a couple kids at home, single mother, and was walking to the next town to try to find some work. She was a day laborer, had no savings, had no property, had nothing. And she guided him. He was trying to get to a certain area, and so she told him how to get there. So he hands her a couple coins, and she breaks down crying. And he recounts later that night that he realized she had probably never, ever been given that amount of aid ever before in her life. And he writes about how this lady was actually representative of the masses, the majority of people in France at that time. And so he writes home to a Reverend James Madison, different than the famous one we're used to, and talks about how that whole day he was walking through these beautiful king's lands. And there were trees, there were forests, there were meadows. It was full of incredible resources. But none of them could be used by the people. They were the king's lands. The lords and the kings could hunt on them, and that was their playground. But people could not use them to support themselves. So as he's telling this story back home, he writes, and I'm going to read a fair bit amount of this letter. It'll go pretty quickly, but I love Jefferson's writing. Within the solitude of my walk, it led me into a train of reflections on that unequal division of property which occasions this numberless instances of wretchedness which I have observed in this country, and it is to be observed all over Europe. The property of this country is absolutely concentrated in a very few hands. I asked myself, what could be the reason so many should be permitted to beg who are willing to work in a country where there is a very considerable portion of uncultivated lands? These lands are undisturbed only for the sake of game. Whenever there are in any country uncultivated lands and unemployed poor, it is clear that the laws of property have been so far extended as to violate natural right. The earth is given as common stock for man to labor and live on. But it is not too soon to provide by every possible means in America that as few as possible shall be without a little portion of land. The small landowner, the small landholders are the most precious part of the state. And I love that letter because he really sets where our nation is headed today if we continue to lock up land like we're doing. But he identified, our founders identified over 250 years ago, how important it is that we own the land, we the people. We've moved very far away from that in this country, but it's moments like this that we have the opportunity to take that back. And I know everyone in this room is working towards that end. So I consider it a real honor to have been spent 2 days with you guys here and to pour into each other these good ideas. And what I would like to do is, as we depart, we go out, we gain more victories, more footholds, and come back together in another year and talk about our successes. Thank you all for being here. God bless you all.